I think we will move to Mateusz Grygoruk and our riverine ecosystems benefits and local knowledge importance.
Thank you, Eva, for invitation, and it's great to be in a group of lecturers of such a nice background and impressive results. I will try to sneak into the topic from perspective of an NGO, from perspective of river user, and at the same time trying to smuggle some things related to science. So I will possibly keep not only within the river itself, but I will try to go around and I will try to focus on different aspects than just a plain river. So this has not been agreed with Virginia as well. Some of people who believe in these nasty theories about the world can say that computer programs making maps only use yellow and red and orange because the same colors I have seen on the Virginia's map. This is Poland, and formerly you have seen Switzerland. The colors are the same. And this is a part of the rationale for my presentation and also I think for the whole university. Most of rivers this or that way require this or other measures for their restoration. So this is just a screenshot from one of the maps we produced together with Ilona and the team in the National Freshwater Restoration Program, and I'm sure you will know more about it today. After the Ilona's talk. So this map shows that gray colors are not that frequent, and mostly we face with the issues of the reddish colors and yellow and orange. This means that most of rivers require some actions. I'm happy to say that most of these actions, especially for the rivers marked with yellow, can be achieved by implementing standard procedures of river management, which can be done wisely and clever. So using the standard procedures, doing nothing extraordinary. But either way, rivers require restoration. The status of these colors originates from the fact that for many years we have been using rivers in a very specific context. Those contexts, they made rather poor. And the context was to use them as much as we can. And I really appreciate one sentence that Virginia said during her presentation, is that when we looked at the picture with a lot of wood in the river and the bridge, saying that the wood is not a... Nowadays, we try to switch our orientation into the fact that we go more for looking at the river and looking at our actions that are in most occasions really severe for river environment. We try to look at them and modify them according to new achievements of environmental engineering, hydrology, geomorphology. It's hard to do it because of the implementation gap, I think. So from idea to action, it takes normally a span of time. There are also the other barriers of, let's say, economic or perception origin or landscape planning. But either way, all of the problems support by increasing social awareness of the environment makes attention on rivers growing exponentially every year. So let's first think that, does the river exist? Well, of course they do exist, but can the river or does the river means the same to us and to all of our friends and people around? Then let's talk about our knowledge and about the denial. So we know certain things, but we deny them, or we try to persuade ourselves that they do not exist because they are real. Then I will tell you a little bit about local ecological knowledge and its value for river management. We talk about some benefits, knowledge and emotions, nutrient removal and water storage. And at the end, I will try to go out from the river and stay more in the catchment, saying that the river is just a final part of the catchment. That's it. From geographic perspective, it's nothing special. It's just a place where water goes from the larger area. But do we realize that these benefits are really, let's say, mine or ours? Do we really consider them personally? And at the end, just conclusions and hints for the discussion that might be arised after the talk. Before we start, I would love you to fill a little survey. I think I should now stop sharing my screen for a second, and I will try to. No, there is a chat. I think no, I cannot see this. So I have to stop sharing my presentation. Now I will try to put the link on the chat so you all see this. And if you find it feasible, please try to fill this survey. There are just two simple questions. Please bear in mind that the second question requires to round up your results up to 100%. Now I'm wondering, can you see my presentation on the screen back again?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so let's go forward. The river and the benefits. So the strategy of communication and asking ourselves, what do we consider a river, or does the river as an average river exist?
Sorry to interrupt, but I cannot see the presentation but a website.
I think you have to refresh it somehow, because in my case, it looks like a former screen, so I can see this. Please let me know if this is a problem of more.
Yes, Mateusz, we can see the website and description Łyna Wolsztynie, Wisła, Warszawa.
Yes, very good, because that's the part of the presentation. So I'm perfectly on the track. So thank you very much. Yes, this should be Łyna Wolsztynie. So I decided to Google some rivers I know, and to see whether the internet provides me the answers I would love to get. So this is Łyna Wolsztynie. Łyna, that's a river. Olsztyn is one of the major cities of Poland. Here you can see not that much beautiful, but still a river, some canoes. So when you Google Łyna Wolsztynie, you get really nice pictures. And you see that the river in Olsztyn exists. Now you should also see Wisła w Warszawie. This should be, again, a screenshot from the website. And then you also see the river with people, the river with bridges, the river in the city with some nice buildings in the background. So here, everything is fine. But when you start searching, you realize that this is not necessarily the true for every case. If you write Dunajec Nowy Sącz, then you get a football club with the name of the river, and just one of the pictures presents you a river, which is even worse in my hometown, which is Białystok. When you go to Białystok, when you write down Biała w Białymstoku, Biała is a small river, but it sucks in the perception of the locals rather strong. Then you see that there is just a major shop, which is called Biała, that's a shopping mall. And there is nothing about the river. There is just a little pond by this shopping mall. The river does not exist. So this means that rivers, I mean, we are biased. So all of us on this river, I think we are all biased because we are river freaks, most of us, and we know what is the river. But we should realize it is not the case in the society. And the perception of a river comes out from our personal experience. So experience is related to our place of living, to our education, job, known history, so to some facts that we might associate with the river. That is why changing the perception of riverine ecosystems among stakeholders and society depends on the possibility of changing, possibly improving their experience related to benefits they gain from the river. And behind this, we have a really nice concept of local ecological knowledge. We are also a part of it. So that's the set of practices and beliefs regarding ecological relationships that are gained through extensive personal observation of and interaction with local ecosystems and shared among local resource users. So this means that when you are talking about a river, you always refer to your experience, and we might expect that in the former times when people were more dependent on rivers and the river was an inherent element of their everyday life, they had some knowledge that now has disappeared. Disappeared because we are not that much connected with the river. The rivers are engineered and we have a feeling that we can control them with constructions, with the processes as well. But sometimes it would be worth of making a little stop, looking behind, and then checking whether the natural stages of rivers allowed in the past for the people to live. Yes?
Sorry, Mateusz, most of the people have the same problem. They cannot see the screen, the full screen. Well, your screen, the presentation screen.
Okay. You are sharing. You are screen sharing. Let's make a little. So I will stop sharing and I will try to start it once again. Okay. And are there any people who saw my presentation? Okay. Either way, I try to share my screen once again. I go for my presentation, which is here. I click share. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, now we can see that.
Okay, so this was about local ecological knowledge and the fact that when we go back to the past, we might expect that people who were dependent on rivers and rivers were in better shape, they can provide us with some information about the river management, about the status of river in the past, how did they use it, and was the river in a good shape, what we have heard of about the definition in the last presentation of Virginia. So when we go more, now I try to, yes, I try to go for the next slide. Apparently it is not easy to find pictures of rivers in the old times. I mean, you can find a lot of pictures, but most of pictures present people doing something upon the river, so constructing a bridge, sitting on, I don't know, boat or ship, or doing some kind of military actions. I have a feeling that in the past people made these documentary scenes only because they thought that doing things upon river is an interesting task, and the river itself is not interesting at all. It is just there. So that's why it is hard to refer to those old pictures, using them as a reference model for the restoration. It's not an easy task. So happily, when you look back, then you get some nice movies which documented people living upon the rivers. And this is one of the cases. I think some of you may know it. That's a movie in Polish. Can you hear the earth crying? So, czy słyszysz, jak płacze ziemia? This is the movie about turning a natural stretch of river Narew into Siemianówka reservoir, so destroying this river. And in the first part of this movie, you can see some of the traditional actions of people staying there. Still, this knowledge is available. Somehow you can extract it, and this local ecological perception can be still gained from the past scenes. But then, at that time, river used to be a core of the society. I have a feeling that distribution of the society between the village and the city was much different than now. So then most of people were acquainted with problems and issues related to the rivers. And then benefits gained from the river itself, they were not considered benefits. They were just considered a regular life and some actions that people normally did or made upon the riverbank. So talking about benefits in the past is rather tricky. Then at that time, they knew how to use ecosystems, but at the same time, their actions were not that influential because of the transport. So if some people were doing fishing, then they were doing fishing only on the local stretches. They were not using possibly electric fishing that is very dangerous to the environment. They were using this because they could, and they were waiting for an appropriate moment. Whilst nowadays, river exists only when causing problems. And you can get a really nice proxy of this when you have a look at the presence of hydrologists like myself or some of you also from the audience at the TV or in the radio. If there is a flood, then they invite us. If there is drought, they invite us. During the day like this, that there is no major problem with water, then hydrology and river science does not exist in the public reality because there are some other problematic issues. So now I would say that the vision of rivers is more negative in the society because we look at them mainly when they cause problems. And this is a huge challenge for us and also for the university in order to improve it, to change it, to use some simple messages to show people that the benefits they gain, to train their experience, that the benefits they gain are really beneficial for their everyday life. And at the end of the day, it's cheaper and easier to implement this, let's say, nature-friendly solutions than to make some technical actions that are available. How does your river look like, guys? So just close your eyes for the second and try to answer yourself, what is your river? So what is your experience with rivers? What kind of river you think of when you're asked, hey, describe me the river? So if a 5-year-old boy and girl approaches you and asks, hey, uncle, hey, auntie, hey, mom and dad, what is your, what is the river? How does the river look like? Then you get first vision. Is this a natural river as you get on the top left picture, or is this one of the rivers we see every day when traveling to work? I mean, not now because we don't travel that much because of the COVID-19, but the rivers you knew from traveling 1 year ago to your job or somewhere else. Yes, so think about your experience, and at the same time, think about the experience of people who are not trained in rivers, in hydrology, or in any other aspects of river science. Think about their approach to rivers. What do they think of rivers, and what might be their perception of the river? So this was a really nice phrase I found recently in one of the books I read, which was Innumeracy, Mathematical Illiteracy and its Consequences. Comparing your experience with rivers, our experience with rivers, and the experience of the others with rivers, we might face a wall because as I put this quote here on the slide, for a person who has never seen in life more than 3 bushes together, there is no meaningful difference between 1,000 and 1,000,000 of trees because it's beyond their perception. And I'm pretty sure that for me, in the other branches of science or in the other branches of everyday life, it is exactly the same. So I don't have a personal experience with some things. So that's why it is very hard to find what is the difference between particular processes. So then at the same time, we also tend to overestimate the probability of extreme events and underestimate the probability of the regular ones. The example is that myself, I will talk about my experience. So then when I step on the plane, I'm always afraid of turbulences, although I know that the probability of dying in a plane crash is much smaller than dying with a stroke or dying in the car accident. Then I put more emotions to this travel on the plane, although I know it's not necessarily proven, or it's not necessarily the fact I should be aware of. And the good example of this is the malfunction of Czajka sewage treatment in Warsaw. Of course, it should never happen. Of course, with the contemporary achievements of the engineering, we should never allow for this problem to happen. So for those of you who are not acquainted with the problem, there is a problem of sewage transfer from one bank of the Vistula in Warsaw to the other, and then this pipeline broke, and for some period of time, I think even today, some of the sewage, not necessarily treated, are disposed directly to Vistula, and this should never happen. But if you compare this issue, this problem, to what you see every day, or you don't see, but you are aware of, that our agriculture is the main polluter, and non-point sources of pollution reach, so nitrates, phosphates, some possibly silica as well, reaches our rivers along their whole courses, not only in one point, but whole courses every day, that most of these rivers are really degraded and the quality of rivers is really poor. And some of the rivers suffered severely this year, like barrage, like Ina, which possibly out of Sweden I will mention later on. They severely, they have been severely disrupted by this, let's say, disposal of nutrients from agriculture. We don't talk about this because that's the business as usual. It happens every day and it's not exciting anymore. So it's not maybe political, or maybe it is so popular in the scale of the whole, not country, but also Europe, that we tend not to look at this as at the real problem. So when you add to this your information bubble, again, I will talk to you about my experience, you have the feeling that when you look at your friends on Facebook and when you watch YouTube, at least I have an impression that the majority of society are fly fishermen, hydrologists, environmentalists, peatland scientists, and they own a small Munsterlander, that my dog, I frequently check things about this breed, and this information does not come out. So coming back, as I did already several times before, coming back to the lecture of Virginia, I am not an optimist. I am not an optimist thinking that the university can change this approach, because we are in the bubble. That's a group of people, and I hope that it will come out from the survey at the end of the day, at the end of my presentation. So please bear in mind that we live in this bubble. Just a simple result of it, I can show you, I showed this already in Krakow, and I'm really happy that all of us, mostly all of us, present at this phenomenal conference in 2016, I think. First three words you associate with the river, first three words you associate with the lake. And there you go, polls, that's the answer of polls. We made this research within more than 800 people and have a look at the results, and the results are for the river and for the lake. Most of you can say that these results are not threatening at all. But when you have a closer look at this, just have a look that some words for the river have worse connotation, like a flood, like I don't know, regulation, inundation, mosquitoes, what is there, like dirt, sludge. Whilst when you go for the lake, you find mainly positive connotations. I cannot understand as firefighters, how are they related to the lake, but still it's positive. Firefighters have a positive perception in the society. So for the river, you get more words, so people have more feelings about the rivers than for the lakes. And at the same time, rivers have more negative connotations than for the lake. We try to quantify this as well, and we try to distinguish different level of perception. So the highest the number, the better the perception in this rows of the perception of a lake and the perception of a river. So if you have a look, just laugh a little bit. So women aged 50, 60 have the best perception of the lake, which is something between 130 and 146. And at the same time, they have the worst perception of river. So they say that rivers are problematic, and the words they use for describing river are definitely less positive than the ones they used for the lake. So bearing in mind this little table, you realize that we are not a representative sample of the general group of the society. So we are at the university, I mean, we are quite special, and our perception is not reflecting the view of the society. So now let's go to the benefits. And those benefits at the same time are clear. Science found already a wide approval about many facts, and these facts should be communicated, and they are communicated in a way in spectacular journals that science is using for communication. But at the same time, we don't take the responsibility of comparing this data to our real life. So this is the concept of nutrient spiraling, and it happens very efficiently in natural rivers, especially with woody debris. So in the rivers that are nicely banded, the other words, natural rivers, this nutrient spiraling, which consists of hydrological retention and biotic and abiotic uptake, means for us that the same amount of contamination that reaches natural river requires less distance of the river to be reproduced into inorganic elements than the regulated rivers. And some of us rose this issue when comparing this to a Vistula and this issue of Czajka. So here you can see the screenshot. That's 1 billion liters of sewage already entered Vistula in Warsaw. Whilst 100 kilometers downstream from this place, there is nearly no sign of this, because Vistula is natural river, and that's a huge water body. So on one hand, you get this sewage dissolved. On the other hand, you have natural processes, especially in summer, that allows for very quick nutrient spiraling, and this sewage can be consumed by the river. What are better numbers for this? You can find in the paper of a friend of mine, Gabi Weigelhofer from Boku, from Vienna. Have a look at this graph, and when you look at this up left picture, there is uptake length. So this means that this restored river, which is the third bar from the left, requires a very small distance to uptake a certain portion of nitrates and phosphates, whilst in the broadened or incised rivers, like the first two bars, first from the left and second from the left, it shows that this stretch can be as long as, let's say, 6 up to even 10 kilometers somehow. So this means that the benefit from having natural river for us is expressed here as a short stretch of the river that may consume a lot of nutrients along its course. The same is for the uptake rate. So if you go now to the bottom right graph, this shows that pristine and restored river, they have a really strong uptake rate in time. So this means that a short stretch of river can quickly digest or recirculate nutrients that are reaching this particular stretch. This is not the case for regulated rivers and the rivers which are incised or broadened, because flow conditions and homogeneity of the river channel makes this processes really impaired, and they don't work that efficiently in general. What happens, what is the result of our, let's say, agricultural management and water management can be seen not only in the scale of one field or one small ditch or river, it is seen much further. So we are not talking about the process which happened only on the spot, but we are talking about a broad range of processes of nutrient transfer from the field to the sea, and that's the European-wide problem. It's not only Poland, it's not only 1 or 2 rivers, but it's the huge, that's a huge issue. When you look at these pictures, especially the one on the bottom, this is water. It is not a mud. This is water in the Sulejowski Reservoir this summer. That was 19th of September 2020. I've been there by occasion, and only there I saw why in Polish this blue algae or toxic algae, sinice, are named after, because the color of this algae was really sine, which is bluish or grayish bluish. That was amazing. At the same time, I was talking to people upon this reservoir, and they said that somehow this year geese are not coming. And they were thinking that it might be because of foxes around. They were thinking that it might be because of, different wind circulation, but they didn't associate the fact of really crappy water quality and the fact that this water was not suitable for any living organisms on top of the blue toxic algae that felt there just fine. When you look at the Baltic Sea, the picture on the right, you might feel surprised because this green color is everywhere. But if you have a closer look at the coast, especially at the coast of Poland or there, Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania as well, you see that this blue-green algae, toxic algae, algal blooms are not present along the coast, which means that we don't see them that much. Although from time to time, they appear along the coast and then swimming is not possible. Now think what happens in the central part of the sea. Now try to think what happens in this huge bucket, which is in the central part of the Baltic Sea where water circulates around. That's really a huge problem. And unless we realize what is the issue of benefits coming from natural rivers or wetland buffer zones, it will never be solved. Then for those of you acquainted with wetland buffer zones, this graph doesn't tell much. It's just the zone upon the river that can be capable to retain some nutrients. And in one of our research projects about the rivers and benefits, we tried to think how efficient they might be. Then we realized that wetland buffer zone is not only the area outside of the river channel. Wetland buffer zones can be integrated with the river. So the river itself might be a wetland buffer zone. So the zone where all of these natural nutrient spiraling processes are taking place. And that's why making rivers natural back again or restoring them, it's not only for the sake of nice indicators of RHS, River Habitat Survey methodology, but it is mainly for the sake of the safe society and clean water. We tried to make an estimation for wetland buffer zones. We tried to see what might be the cost of their establishment in the smaller catchments. That's the case of Narew catchment in northeastern part of Poland with excluded Biebrza part because there are some large wetland sites that did not allow us to make these calculations accurate enough. Then we found out that these wetland buffer zones are capable to remove up to 82% of nitrates and even in some cases up to 87% of phosphorus. Of course, this is the top limit. Normally, it's not the case. It's not that efficient. But if you think about the costs which can be associated to building 20 kilometers of an express road, comparing this to all catchments in this Narew area, then it's nothing. So then you ask your question why it is not done, because it tends to be only a political decision. The money should be there and it's not that expensive to pay for having these rivers back again working as the filters, or in fact it is not paying, it's just an investment. Because when we invest this money, it will pay off in the next years. That's for sure, and we already proved this in the other studies. If you look at some scientific numbers or science-based numbers that you can use for your own personal studies or experiments, we made a really nice overview of all published studies about the efficiency of wetland buffer zones, how they can be successful in increasing water quality. You can see here that in average, the load of nitrogen can be reduced up to the level of as high as 43% in average. So it is not the maximum level, it's just an average. And the phosphorus, the same, is like 21%. And this was the revision of a number of studies published in scientific journals about the efficiency of wetland buffer zones. Moreover, if you do it wisely, it is not only the investment, or it is not only the benefit that is somewhere there far away in the Baltic Sea or in the next river. No, it can be also used by farmers on the spot, because it perfectly fits to the idea of circular economy. So having our rivers in good shape, looking at all of the benefits they provide, we might use these wetland buffer zones or wetlands upon the rivers itself as a source of biomass. And this biomass can be transferred either into the biogas or into the compost that provides us either with the heat, so production of the energy, or with production of fertilizer, natural fertilizer that can be disposed on the field, and then the loop is closed. So then the same nutrients that did not or were not captured by the plants in the agricultural area, it can be, let's say, retained and back again put on those fields. So it might be working. The studies about the economical part of this action are still under the analysis, so they are being done. I'm pretty sure soon I can tell you more about it. Then the same for peatlands or for water retention. In Poland, we are fighting for every decimal digit of percent for water retention, and our ministry, or our former Ministry of Maritime Problems and Inland Navigation, they said that we have 6% of water retention. But when you go back and if you have a look how this value have been calculated, then you quickly realize that they account only for the amount of water which is stored in 20 up to 25 largest reservoirs of Poland. They cannot see the retention of drainage systems. So this little land reclamation dams. So they cannot see all of the projects which are implemented in forests. So the 6% they show on every graph is a kind of severe underestimation of the water storage. Here with one of my students, with Marta Stachowicz, she managed to calculate what is the meaning of restoration of peatlands in the Neman catchment. So that's another huge river that touches Poland. It's mainly in Belarus and Lithuania, but still Poland is a part of its basin. So Marta calculated that just restoration of wetlands brings us the benefit of 18 millions of cubic meters of water. And this is just water. We don't talk about the other benefits like reducing carbon footprints or reducing emissions of carbon dioxide. We are not talking about reducing nitrates or phosphates. The cost of this restoration would be approximately 6 million euros per year when you include the depreciation rate. At the same time, the value of water retention is approximately 32 million. So it's 4 up to 5 times more. So you see that the benefits are really measurable, and restoring rivers or improving this natural features of rivers or wetlands is also beneficial not only in terms of our feelings that I like nice wetlands or nice rivers, but it also pays off when you look at the economical part of this thing. Then staying with this 18 millions of cubic meters of water retention, that's the volume of the biggest artificial reservoir in northeastern part of Poland, which is the Siemianówka reservoir. and still you can hear these noises saying that these reservoirs are reducing floods when there is a lot of water, and then they release this water during droughts. That's a fantastic fairy tale. I tell it to my children every evening, and they fall asleep immediately when they hear about this. So when you look at denying some facts, then some people say that Narew is drying up because of the climate. But when you have a closer look at the scientific data, and this is one of our papers published time ago in Water, then have a look at this graph. Just on the left-hand side, I provided the description so you see them clearly. These bluish colors are bankful discharge, and the reddish colors are low discharge. The more intensive the color is, the more severe the phenomenon is. So if you look at here at this dark blue colors, it means that there was a lot of flooding. And if you look at the red color, the deep red color, then you get also the severe drought. And this arrow in the middle, it shows you the time when the Siemianówka was created. I mean, started operating, not created, but started operating. And you can immediately see that Siemianówka did not change that much spring flooding. Of course, it reduced the duration of the spring flooding. You can see this, and it was statistically proven. And at the same time, it did not cause any result on summer droughts because of the evapotranspiration area. So the evapotranspiration area of the lake, transpiration area, is so high that majority of water just evaporates, and this reservoir, just like more lowland reservoirs of Poland and of the whole Europe, are not capable to deal with long-lasting droughts. And this is not, for sure, that's not a solution for supplying us with water during the climate crisis. Looking at the catchment and looking at the issues related to rivers in cities, then we all realize that river is just an element of our reality. But there might be different geographical setups of rivers and the problems associated with rivers in the city. So on one hand, you might get Gdańsk, and Gdańsk is located in the lowermost part of the small river Strzyża and the Białystok, northeastern part of Poland, which remains a catchment for the river Biała. We tried to have a look what happens when we are doing these crappy things in the area of catchment, not only in the river, not only regulating the river, but what happens to our river systems when we focus on the catchment. That's just a part of the city, 1 hectare of the city, approximately 1 hectare, that's 1.04. That's an aerial picture. There is some park, there are some buildings, but when you have a look at this, then you realize that most of this area is impermeable. So it means that during the rainfall events, especially heavy rainfall events, most of water does not infiltrate to the ground, but most of this water is being transferred to the sewage system and is being released to the nearest water body, like small river or so. So this is all about the runoff coefficient, which gets the values from 0.1, let's say, on the natural nice meadow, through 0.35 when you look at the railroad track, up to 0.1 when we are talking about the concrete road or a starting lane at the airport. So this is the value that governs most problems with water in the city. We made this little calculation. That's just a rough equation. I show it to you just for you to see it. This equation is used to calculate the runoff caused by certain rainfall. That's applied hydrology. You don't necessarily need to know it, but then runoff coefficient is very important. We try to see what happens in the condition of 20 minutes rainfall of the probability of 5%. So it's like a huge rainfall sometimes happen in our countries during summer, one day, like 20 20 minutes. Sorry for not translating some of those signs here, but I didn't find an editable version of Excel, but it is the River University, so it should train you broadly also in languages. So that's it. It's like without the city, the left circle, then you get the second one is variance 0. So it's like it is right now. Then you have negative scenario and you have the positive scenario. This blue color is the green areas. So you can see that in this negative scenario, we remove all of this, or not all, but majority of green areas. We increase the area of ulice and chodniki, so that's streets and pavements or sidewalks in American. Then you keep the distributed housing at the same level, but we increase this condensed housing like big blocks or big residential buildings. And then you see that in the positive scenario, which is the last one, and if you have a look at the bottom right number, which is 213, this is the amount of water that outflows from this area, comparing to 100%, which was there when the city was not present. And when you go to the negative scenario, we see that this is nearly 300%. So 300%, we increase runoff in the catchment. This means that we don't make water available for the river. We just flush it immediately in one moment from the system. There is no savings. It is just a quick reaction. We make this reaction even more prompt. So we enhance water outflow to the nearest river. And the problems we see at the very end, again, coming back to the former lecture, we think that this is the river who is causing the problem. And in fact, no, the river is not causing any problem. The problem is far upstream. The problem is in the catchment, and not many people realize about this issue. So in the city, to put things short, it's much easier to make situation worse than to improve it. Because when you can see this, the positive scenario is only 213. With the 0 variant, which is the second graph, it gives you 226%. So the difference between the positive scenario, which can be done, and the variant 0, which is there on the ground, is not that much. It's not that big. So cities and catchments are critical. Having looked at what happens, it's much better to leave the river freely, or at least to pretend we leave the river freely. So to make this double stage channel. Of course, it requires a lot of area, or I mean, much more area than dredging the river or making the river to incise more and more, especially facing the fact that this incision makes also a lot of harm to the valley area, to the whole city, and it makes the river outflowing very quick during the periods of drought. This is the double stage channel. I mean, the double stage created on its own because the river just flooded the park, and that's it. So I would say that the problem of river benefits should be also associated with the fact that these benefits are there when the river is flooding to these natural areas, not only when the river is kept there in the channel, because that's an inherent element of the river. It did this in the past, it will do this in the future. The earlier we understand it, the better for the land management. Let's have a look now about the benefits. Let's have a look at the end of my presentation at the results of the survey. I will try to switch this on and share my screen. What is there? Let's have a look at the river benefits. Let's have a look at the rules. I hope some of you filled this. I will share my screen just in a second. Just hold on. Okay, I'm waiting for the result. It's still circulating. Okay, it's nearly there. We should have 22 answers. So thank you very much. Some of you answered, and I'm really happy with this. Let's share the screen right now. The results are still running. please tell if you can see the results.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, so you can see it now that most of us are professionals, and there are no people interested in rivers at all, which is great. Of course, I expected this because that's a river university, so we all love rivers. If not, then we have a problem. I am really sad that there are no hobbyists with us, because I would put first and foremost that I'm a hobbyist, because my scientific interest grown from my hobbies. But then the second graph, if you have a look at this, how important for you are the benefits that remain provided by the river? You see that the distribution is not equal. We don't get this equal line, so these bars are not of the similar size, maybe because of the structure of the survey, but I tend to believe that it is rather because we all know that these natural processes and the landscape are the most important, and then the navigation does not play that much role, because in fact it's not a benefit for all of us. And you also see the bias for the final answers. So we don't necessarily look at all of the benefits at the same time, because our experience, so our professional experience, is possibly related to the fact that we are mostly dealing with processes or landscape planning, some attributes of the nice looking rivers, and this and the other elements of this let's say feature. So now again, I stopped sharing my screen and I started again with my presentation, just to sum it up. It's here, I think. Okay. I hope you can see the screen. If you don't see this, just let me know. So knowing this, it's easy to answer what is your relation to the river. So if you can use your knowledge, or if within 100 years from now, our knowledge will be considered local and ecological, because so far we know some features and we can observe the landscape of the river. We know that our knowledge can contribute to river management or to river restoration process, at least with setting goals, planning of restoration measures and implementation. So we know that possibly our experience could help with building strong partnership with local communities, and also using this let's say natural processes behind and knowledge of people up on the river can be beneficial for river management. We know it, but does the society know it? Knows it? I think that the things that in the past were just considered a regular life now are called benefits, and it's just because the communication failures, these benefits are not recognized among the broad society. I'm wondering if we talk about agriculture, wetland buffer zones, appropriate catchment management, do we consider these benefits as our own, or is this the general benefit that if something is general, you know that we don't pay attention to that? And I'm really happy to know that none of us are here accidentally, but at the same time, it's sad, because we should first and foremost communicate river science to people who are accidentally combined with the river, because the media and whatsoever has a much broader result when we talk to the broader audience, not directly focused at rivers. Conclusions in numbers, so we get something to your perception, like 100% of restored river is the same accurate when talking about self-purification than 10 kilometers of regulated river. 43% of nitrates and 21% of phosphates can be retained in wetland buffer zones. Managing outflow in urbanized area is much harder to improve hydrological conditions than to deteriorate them. And I think what we all agree upon now is that river existence in a public space is required. How to make the river to exist? Go to your river. Know your river, talk about your river. This is the way I try to do it. That was the river walk in Białystok. We just put on waders. We attracted people on Facebook. We invited them to walk in the river, and that's a spectacular feeling when you step into the river if you wade, especially if you haven't done so in your life. So that's something spectacular, and you get different perspective of the city. You get different perspective of the river at the same time. Maybe worth of thinking about this type of stuff. Or start to be fly fishermen, because as Lee Wolf said, teach a person to fly fish and you have just created conservationists. I said the same in Krakow. I end up with these messages now. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedbacks.